Welcome everybody to our next talk regarding young women leaders making big impacts. My name is Jenna Persons Malika, and I have the pleasure of serving on the Florida Commission on the Status of Women. And I also have the pleasure of serving in the Florida House in our Florida legislature. I represent House District 78 down in Fort Myers and ran my own campaign this last year and came up and joined a great legislature that also includes some fantastic women. And through that journey, I've had the privilege and the pleasure of meeting many other incredible women who you will meet today. In today's forum, we're going to discuss how younger women are getting more and more involved in politics every year, whether running for office or contributing to campaigns or volunteering their time, and as well as how more and more younger women are getting active in a variety of various issues. So it is a pleasure to lead this discussion today, and I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Representative Anna Eskamani, that's State House Representative for District 47. We have Julia Kennedy, Director of Keystone Florida, University of Florida, and Samantha Sexton, Director of Government Relations for the University of Florida. And I'm going to give you a brief background information on each of our panelists and then turn it over to them to say a few words. Representative Anna Eskamani is the state representative for House District 47. She ran for office for the first time in 2018, making history as the first Iranian American elected to any public office in Florida. In 2020, she won her re-election by an overwhelming majority, and I have the privilege of serving with her in the Florida House. She was born and raised in Orlando, went to public schools in Orange County, and then to the University of Central Florida, where she earned dual degrees as an undergrad and graduate student. And in addition to her time serving in the Florida legislature, Representative Eskamani is also now getting her PhD in public affairs and works in the nonprofit sector. Samantha Sexton is the Director of Government Relations for the University of Florida, advancing the university's interests at the state level up in Tallahassee. Before joining the University of Florida, Samantha served as the Vice President of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs for the Personal Insurance Federation of Florida. She also spent time serving as the Director of Government Affairs for the PACE Center for Girls, Inc. She was recognized in 2020 by the Tallahassee Democrat as one of the 25 women you need to know. Samantha also graduated from the University of Florida with her BA and MA in political science and certificates in international relations and political campaigning. She remains an active member of Florida Blue Key. And last but not least, Julia Kennedy, another University of Florida student and soon to be graduating senior. Julia serves as the Executive Director of Engage Florida, a community development initiative in partnership with the University of Florida Office of Collaborative Initiatives, and she is the Director of Keystone Florida, a student leadership program through Florida Blue Key. Her focus while at the University of Florida has been on the connection between public policy, civic engagement, and the ability of institutions to foster leadership. After graduation, she hopes to pursue a career in public service for the state of Florida. So ladies, I'd love to turn the discussion over to you all to begin and share a little bit with us about your background story, your personal story and the journey that led you to where you are today and whether you expected to be on this current journey. Representative Eskamani, why don't we begin with you?
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to serve with you in the Florida legislature, and it's great to see familiar faces and new faces. And again, my name is Anna Eskamani, and I'm really proud to serve in the Florida legislature. But like so many young people, our stories kind of start at home, you know, back with in our families and their lived experiences. And in my case, I am the daughter of immigrants. My parents came from two different parts of Iran, but actually met in Orlando working at the same donut shop, and decided to make Orlando their home. My dad went to UCF as well. And my mom had a degree from Iran she couldn't use, so she worked at fast food restaurants, eventually at Kmart, and that was her last job because in 2004 she passed away to cancer. So a lot of what I do every single day is grounded in my own personal experiences, and I have to tell y'all that my passion for women and girls really does come from not having a mom growing up and wanting to make sure that I could be a big sister to others around me, that we could help break down any barriers that were holding girls back from being their authentic selves and seeking leadership opportunities. And so when I was 18 years old, I actually was looking for answers about reproductive health and found myself at a Planned Parenthood health center looking for birth control. And I think that was one of my first experiences as a young woman, kind of navigating this world that is super complicated and doesn't have enough resources, especially focused on the needs of women and girls. And so that foundation kind of led me to go to UCF myself, and I got really involved in advocacy for women and girl issues, not just locally, but also internationally, because I was studying international relations when I was at UCF, but I just got super involved with the college Democrats at UCF and started doing voter registration and different advocacy for issues, and that was kind of the beginning of my efficacy as someone who watches local politics and got really involved in campaigning. And before I knew it, I was volunteering on campaigns all through college, and then even when I worked at the nonprofit sector, would volunteer with advocacy organizations and local Democratic Party. And when I made the decision to run for office as a first-time candidate myself, it was not easy, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But for many women, running for office, I mean, we have to be asked, some research says more than 7 times to take the opportunity seriously. And I definitely had to really reflect on my own my own personal goals, but also just the risk of losing felt so heavy. And for many of us, we don't get second chances compared to our male counterparts who can kind of run for office. They don't win, dust themselves back up, try again. It feels a little bit harder for women, especially young women. And so I had the courage, I built it up to do it, and here we are today. So super excited to hear from my fellow panelists and their experiences, and looking forward to some of the takeaways from this discussion.
Thank you, Rep. And you hit on a great point. And we've looked at studies in the past regarding women and their desires to move up in the workplace and serve on boards and run for office. And the studies have shown that before a woman sometimes takes that step, she has to internally feel that she's over-prepared for that job or that promotion or that new challenge. Whereas sometimes our male counterparts just jump ahead, whether they feel they're prepared for that position or not. So I know you all have done much soul searching in making every decision in your lives. But Samantha, let me turn it over to you and tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey that you've been on.
Well, Commissioner, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm excited to have this conversation today because, like the representative said, there are new faces, but I think collectively, some of our experiences will hopefully inform those that are joining us for this conversation. So, like the representative and even many people that are probably joining, I was, as a child, impacted by hurricanes. So my family, we really spent much of our summers and early falls, in the streets with our neighbors, cleaning up or supplying our community with the resources that they needed in a time of crisis or emergency. So from a very early on, or an early age, I was just impacted by community service, civic engagement. I had wonderful parents and grandparents who really challenged my way of thinking, required me at the dinner table to come prepared with those facts, statistics, and figures to really argue what I was standing up for or what I believed in. And so as I went on to the University of Florida, I utilized those speech and debate experiences, those summers, taking various courses all throughout high school to really find myself on a path of truly civic leadership, or at the time, that's what I was really, truly pursuing. Found myself serving in student government, as the representative also did, volunteering on those campaigns, whether it was for pizza and macaroni or for a few dollars here and there throughout the various election cycles, but ultimately went on to pursue an education and political campaigns. I thought that was just fascinating, but also approached it from a position of how do we do something different? How do we change the system for more people to get engaged, whether that's through the opportunity to be heard as a constituent, or take that next step as an elected or someone who's running for office. I found that just to be absolutely fascinating. Continued on in that work through paid opportunities on federal campaigns, and ultimately came and established myself here in Tallahassee. But I think where I was grounded and rooted in where I am today on my journey was through the work of Pace Center for Girls. It was just absolutely remarkable to see young individuals, young women, to really stand up in DC in front of that congressional podium and tell their story, tell their truth, something that I felt, who was 10 plus years older than them, I could not do. So the confidence that they instilled in me, but also I think so much of the questioning that I came back with myself with, was just transformative. And I believe today, where I can give back, I want to do that, but I also want to continue to learn from those that are around me to better myself. So look forward to the conversation that we'll have today. I think we'll dig into so much of that. And thank you again.
Thank you, Samantha. Julia, another fellow Gator, tell us about your journey and where you are and where you're hoping to go next.
Well, I think the first thing to say is my journey is pretty short. I haven't embarked yet on a career in public service, but I do have a deep appreciation and respect for those that have. I'm an 8th generation Floridian. I am from Lakeland. I have been deeply, deeply impacted by growing up in a community that looks and is introspective about the needs of others. It has been an experience that shaped my perspective on what I want my leadership to look like. So I went to the University of Florida, and I feel a little cheesy saying go Gators and all of this, but truly that experience, being a student there, shaped my perspective on what service looks like. While I was in the city of Gainesville, I got really connected with the homeless community there. And I did what was I think my parents' worst nightmare, which was stomping around in the woods in the back of Gainesville, working to get the homeless connected to resources. And it makes an experience like that makes you think, why do problems like this exist? And how is it that we can do something about them in a way that's substantive, cut the fluff, really do the work? And so I had this experience of realizing that there are things that I deeply, deeply believe in, and that I want to sort of stand in the gap for people. And I didn't know how to do that well. And so you mentioned at the beginning in my bio that one of the things that I'm involved in is the development of Engage Florida. And so Engage Florida is now a community think tank based at the University of Florida, working to solve some of those issues. How do we substantively connect students to the issues in their community? So that experience, I think, is my beginning of what I hope will be a career in public service to the state. And I'm so inspired by each one of you here, quite frankly, but also by women in the state. Over the course of my time at college and my time growing up, I have been able to see really what it means to serve. And so it's a privilege to look to that, but also to use that as an example to action now. I think that's one thing that, and Representative Askamani, you mentioned this, the sort of feeling that you, and the urge to do something now, to step quickly into service, I think is something that's common. So that's a little bit about me, kind of where I've been, but mostly to say that it's just the beginning, and that's where I'm sort of gained a lot of inspiration from the people around me and from the actions that I've been able to take during my time at the University of Florida.
Thank you, Julia. And you are absolutely correct. It's just the beginning, and it's constantly just the beginning of a new chapter for each and every one of us and all of the women around the state as we take on new challenges or new goals or advocate on new issues. You each spoke of issues and experiences that inspired you to get involved to help people. And thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to ask each of you to expand a little bit more on that, but also touch on why is the role of young women in politics or involved in these issues so important? And do you believe that having women in these leadership roles provides a different kind of voice? I'm hearing your voices on these issues, and why or why not is important to have women's voices on these issues? Rep. Eskamani?
Oh my gosh, the benefits are huge. I mean, you heard from both of my fellow panelists expressions of empathy, right? So, and I do think that empathy is really lacking in politics today. And every person has the capacity to be empathetic, but I will say that I think for so many women, we come into service because of empathy. It's not a career move for us. It's very much a desire to support our community, whether it's that specific moment, the catalyst that pushes us, or just years of doing the work and realizing, hey, I could be more effective in this position to do this work. So I think that drive grounded in empathy and community and family is very, very important, and it leads to better, more bipartisan policy. Research has showed us that when women are in elected position, they tend to file more bills, they tend to co-sponsor more bills, work across the aisle more, and I also think that having the experiences of young women and of mothers in the process is really important, because there are so many disparities, whether it's along maternal mortality rates, whether it's around homelessness and homelessness of single parents and single moms, whether it's equal work for equal pay, and navigating the business community as a woman, which still is not the norm for women in leadership positions. It's getting better, but we have a long way to go. So seeing women lead on those efforts in both politics and business and academics and sports, I mean, it is not only necessary to develop a better product, right? But it's inspirational for more women and girls to follow in those footsteps. And there's been many moments when I'm at UCF and I'm running to next meeting or whatever, and a student will stop me and ask if I'm on Eskamani, and it's just so cool, because like that's our existence building power without even trying, right? Like we're building this new generation of folks that see their worth, see their power, and are not going to be like ego driven by it. That's something else too that I so love about working with women, is that ego is like not even an issue. Like especially young women, it's about getting the job done. It's about supporting one another. Jealousy is just like kind of put us, I think folks will always feel it sometimes, because it's just one of those like defensive mechanisms we have. But this next generation is so good at rejecting the pressures of jealousy to feel that way and embracing collective impact instead. So I'm very excited about that, and anything I can ever do to support young people and building that new approach to problem solving, I'm like so down to be a part of.
I think that something.
Go ahead, Julia.
Oh no, I was going to say, I think that something that Representative Eskamani said there is really critical. The idea that there's community. I think that community, and we are recognizing this, I think more now than ever, is critical to the development of not only ourselves, but to the ability of our society to truly come together in a way that's productive, something we've been deprived of recently. And so specifically to the community of women, I think that that's something that I have seen is just so critical in the context of women's voices. So when women, and when there's a strong community of women, their voices are more likely to be amplified. And Representative Persons, you said this at the beginning, that women who are running for office, or women who are stepping into positions of leadership, feel as if they have to be basically 150% qualified to take on a position. That's a statistic that I heard before. I think that we're less likely to fall into what is really, that's a trap. We're less likely to fall into that trap if there are other women around us lifting us up and being in community. I feel strongly that everybody, men, women, all together have an individual perspective, an individual ability, and then it takes both sort of sides of the equation to be able to lift one another up in a way that's substantive. But I think we as women have a unique burden to amplify the voices of other women and look to leadership. That's why I think mentorship is so important. That's something I've learned as a young person. You ask. It's like you have to ask. You have to go to someone. You have to say, hi, listen, I really admire you. I think you're extraordinary. and I want to learn from you. So how do I do that in a way that's substantive? I've had experiences where I've done that. I have mentors who are doing extraordinary things, and they can give me wisdom and perspective that I just would not have otherwise. So I think when you look at women sort of stepping up and using their voices in public service, running for office, doing all these things that you mentioned at the beginning, you got to take 10 steps back. And that's where I am right now, is that 10 steps back. So I feel like I have a little bit of perspective on what that means from the beginning, because I'm feeling that now. I'm getting coffee with people saying, how do you do this? How do you step into a career of service? What does service mean for a woman? And I do think that there's so much to be said for listening well. That's one thing that I have been so incredibly grateful to have spent time on, because it's a skill. It's not something that you're just sort of born knowing how to do. I think our natural inclination. So listening really well so that you can amplify the voices of other people, women in particular, I think is critically important as we sort of have this conversation about women's voices.
Thank you, Julia. That was a very, very powerful testament as to women's voices and where you are in your journey as well. Samantha, add to the conversation regarding the power of women's voices in the lobbying and advocacy silo.
Absolutely. And I'm actually going to take my professional hat off for a moment while I can. I had the fortunate opportunity last year to serve as the chair of the Junior Leagues of Florida State Public Affairs Committee. So that's more than 23 junior leagues, 11,000 women. And I will say, Representative, specific to that question, our role is enabling them to feel the confidence, find the tools, to find their voice, find those passions, or really leverage their passion, right? Because as I mentioned, more than 11,000 women coming together for one common cause, I mean, that's incredible. But when you start to really tease out where there are strengths within clusters or within groups or regional coalitions, that is super exciting. But also sharing with them how they can take their learned lessons, whether it's here in Tallahassee, because many of them will interact with the Lobby Corps as a volunteer, as a constituent, or as a paid member of our industry. But then also, I mean, my goodness, just the other day, I was seeing people win their local elections or decide to file as a result of those local elections. And it's all because of the opportunities that women have had in recent years to really lean on one another, as Julia has said. And Representative Ana Escamani had even pointed out earlier, you know, what are those learned lessons or life experiences that are going to ultimately lead you to make the jump or lean in to that tough conversation? But I think, you know, Junior League aside, the power of the female lobby corps, while we are small, we are mighty. And it has been really exciting to see more and more younger women step up into staff roles or step into this position. I think we see them come through nonprofits because that's just where they naturally serve. And then they find the opportunity to say, all right, the rest of the world needs to hear about this particular issue or the solution that we have to this statewide challenge, because so much of what we talk about here in Tallahassee, it is getting done at the local level. So we have those case studies and we have the local champions. And I think that's where that continued value is just seen throughout our local community here.
Thank you, ladies. And I agree completely. Even in my own legislative life, I have had great female mentors. And then I have mentees and younger women who look up to us in those roles and aspire to someday serve their community in the same fashion. I've hired my entire legislative staff are females, are women, and just rock star women. And I'm very proud of that fact. And men offer and contribute so much to the process and so much to our lives as well. But as women, when we can have that collective voice and work together and truly help our communities, I think that's special. And to see our numbers growing in political leadership roles and community leadership roles and organizational leadership roles. So again, thank you for continuing to share your experiences with us. When we look back on our own experiences and look at experiences of others, how do you believe that we can broaden or improve the experiences that girls and young women have with politics?
So
would like to lead off.
Yeah, so I'll take that one first. And listening to Samantha and Julie made me think too about even some of the like events that my office has hosted. We try to be really intentional in featuring women's voices. And we did a panel earlier that was focused on tax issues. And candidly, like some of the best people in tax policy tend to be men, because it's just a field that has been locked to women for a very long time for different reasons. But we went an extra level to say, oh no, we know there are women out here doing this work. Let's go find them. And sure enough, we were able to find an amazing leader in state tax policy based out of DC, and she zoomed in to speak to everyone. So again, this point of like when you come into the space with that lens, you are more intentional in making sure that women's voices are included, even in spaces that are predominantly going to be men. You're making that extra effort, and candidly, not every person is doing that. And I feel like women are much more likely to take the extra effort to ensure there is representation and equity within these spaces. But to the heart of your question of, what can we do to make this path better for young people? I mean, Julia is an incredible example of that. And, creating a path for herself to not only be in leadership positions, but to also identify mentors. And I really appreciate this point about mentors. I'm looking back to some of my biggest mentors, who included men like my AP government teacher, Mr. Norris, all the way to my women's studies professor, Dr. Maria Cristina Santana, and so many other folks, throughout this journey that have always been there for me, no matter the situation. And so I do think the more that we can show up as mentors and give with that expectation, the better that will be in helping the next generation get more involved. I've also been a really key proponent of internships, and my office has been really taking a leadership role in developing a robust internship program that other lawmakers have tried to replicate, and we've shared resources with other lawmakers, because we do feel that a part of breaking down those barriers is allowing women and girls to envision themselves in that space. And so what can we do, whether in the public sector or the private sector, to create new opportunities for students, for young people to get that everyday experience, to sit in on meetings, to watch the committee spaces, know the legislative process. Like you said earlier, Representative, it breaks down the hesitation and the potential concerns of qualifications, because you're going to come to the space feeling qualified because you know more than half people in the room. When you have those type of experiences, when you're doing that job application or that job interview or that promotion ask. So I think mentorship is really key, internship opportunities. The best advice I would give to any young person is get involved. Get involved with your registered student organizations, find out what your passion is, and just go for it. And always ask for guidance, but at the end of the day, you need to trust your gut, because you're going to know what's best for you compared to anyone else around you. And so listen to that feeling in your heart, that voice in your head, and do what makes you happy.
Yes, Rep, you hit it on the head. The first thing you do is believe in yourself. And Samantha, I know you know that well from Pace Center for Girls. Believe it in girls, believe in yourself, and then you can go out there and nothing can stop you. And as you face challenges and come up against obstacles, that power within you helps you move forward. And then you can lean on great mentors and great folks in the community as well. Samantha, Julia, how do you think that we can better broaden and continue down this path of getting more and more young women and girls involved in politics and involved in advocacy?
I think immediately it's creating space for them. It's creating space for them to step into, because without that, why would anyone walk into the arena? If they feel that it's already shoulder to shoulder, I know I wouldn't want to. It's like walking into Target on a Saturday afternoon when there's college students moving into a nearby community. It's just something you don't want to do. And so I think as you interact with individuals, start to figure out what their passion is. How can you help them leverage it? How can you help them more closely define it? Because as with any mentorship, if you walk into that relationship and you don't have a specific goal or specific need, or just a a desire to understand some facet of their experience, it won't be as rich as others. So to me, it's really carving out intentionally what you want to achieve, because I think, as you've heard all three of us, and you have a great rich story as well, it's what are those experiences that you have gleaned from, learned from, but where have you also kind of just said, I'm going to do it and I'm not really sure what I'm going to get out of it, right? You have to be comfortable with taking that risk, and having the right people around you to support you when you start to question that risk, and then also tell you to stay in that arena, because so many people have created it for you. And I think taking, I don't want to say advantage of, but seizing that moment when it's the right time. I mean, those are just some of the basic, I think, fundamental building blocks to creating space. And I think more people are doing it than we suspect.
I have two things that I think are critically important in this entire equation. The first one is to start early. One of the most impactful experiences I've ever had is, and it's actually not an experience, it's a person. Her name was Miss Rafferty. She was my first grade teacher, which, I think sometimes we talk about the importance of educators, but I had someone when I was very, very young who told me, Julia, this is what you are good at. This is a talent that you have. I believe in you. And she changed my life along with the lives of many other people. She's someone I still look up to today. So I think starting early is just critically important for young women, giving them the support that they need so that they can grow in confidence to be able to look to the needs of others. That's one of the things that I think is critical about public service and running for office, et cetera. And I see this, and I speak to this from looking to the examples of others, is it's not so much about running for office, it's about being able to identify and look to the need of people today, and then with confidence seek to meet it. So I think that sort of element of starting early in the lives of young women is so critical, because it gives them the time to be able to develop that confidence, but then also to look to mentors, to take advantage of opportunities, and it starts a trajectory for them that I think is critically important, and it has been something that's been done for me. And then the second thing that I think is really important is time. So Samantha spoke a little bit to this, but the idea that it's incredibly powerful when you're sort of looking to amplify young women in public service to take time to invest in them. But I'd go a step further and say that it's not only time, but it's the time to do what I had mentioned a moment ago with Miss Rafferty. She told me what I was good at. But the thing that has also been the most beneficial to me within that time with mentors and people that I look up to is when they told me what I'm bad at. So when they look at me and they say, Julia, you really need to work on this. This is something that's important for you to develop. I think that also takes confidence from other women, because I think sometimes it's seen as a negative to give constructive criticism to other people. But those have been the moments where I have grown the most. And I think there's some kind of harmful sentimentality about not being able to give that constructive criticism. And it leads to women, quite frankly, not growing the way that they should, and puts them at a disadvantage, because we're seen as sort of being catty for or overly emotional, which I hate that that's ever something that's used for giving criticism to other women around us, when really it's a growth opportunity, and it's been something that has shaped me as a professional more than anything else. So those are two things that I think are really important, but they all have to happen in context, right? So they don't happen in a vacuum, they happen in opportunity. So it's all of these different elements coming together so that we can work to the benefit of other women, and women can be lifted up. But they can't happen asynchronously. They all have to happen at once. And I think that's the challenge, because that requires a community. And a community requires women to sort of work together, and also not only women, but men to support women so that they can sort of achieve the goals that we set for ourselves.
Julia, I love that you hit on how our experiences prepare us for our next experience. And every experience we have is an opportunity to learn and grow. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, I've been an attorney now for 13 years. I'm a much better attorney today than I was in my first year, and better at my presentations, and better at solving and finding solutions to problems, because you take every opportunity and continue to grow. I want to open it up to the three of you. Are there any particular experiences that come to mind, whether a challenge that you overcame or something that inspired you, or a moment in which you grew that you'd like to share with the group to inspire them.
I'll jump right in. It's one that I have shared in detail with a lot of up and coming individuals, one that are seeking to really, like I said, step into that space that they see, but they don't have the confidence or the support behind them to do that. So when I was moving out of my master's program into what I thought would be my next kind of big to do, or that next step you just naturally take after, you know, getting another shiny diploma, I sought something that I personally was not prepared for and did not prepare. And so leaving it at that, you can fill in the context with probably something in your own life where you've said, you know what, I'm going to do it because it's one expected, or because it's just easy. But most of the time where we fail as individuals or a collective group, it's around something that we just haven't fully bought into, we haven't prepared for. And so what I will say is, while so many opportunities came out of that, it was a realization for me to just not do what is expected, do what I personally want to pursue, but also champion and lead down those paths that I have started to kind of already forge out on my own. And so I think that's the way I continue to live day to day, but also with my professional career. I want to give back to the organizations that have helped me or built the people around me, which is why I think, when you look at the few positions that I've held in the last 8 to 10 years, there's a direct correlation back to that experience as a young girl or a student or somewhere that I want to be. So I'll leave it at that. But I think, if you haven't had that big no or that door shut, look for it, because it's probably in your past somewhere, or be expecting it. Two very different things, but good things to be looking for.
And I'll just add to you that I've always felt super blessed to have a lot of mama bears in my life. And so, when I was at UCF and even before that too, not having my own mom that I could lean on for advice, or even on those like really stressful days, right? Whether it was I wasn't feeling well, or I didn't get a good test on a good grade on a test, or there's those moments where you really want to have parents you could talk to, and that was not the norm in my life. And so there were just so many mama bears that really embraced me, and whether it was League of One Voters of Florida and the local chapter of the League of One Voters, whether it was my professors, the Democratic volunteers, or the folks at Planned Parenthood. I mean, it was really, really just super lucky to have that network of support around me. And actually my first job out of college was offered to me by the new CEO at the Planned Parenthood affiliate locally. She had just started. She was one of the youngest CEOs in Central Florida at the time. I think she was about 30 years old when she got that position. And so she invited me out for coffee. I wasn't graduated yet. I was about to, and she offered me a very entry-level position with this nonprofit. And I gave it a day, and I accepted it, and the rest is kind of history. But the fact that she was a young woman, a young CEO, offering this new opportunity to another young, fresh-faced person, I think was another example of what we're talking about, right? Like, women are also willing to take risk for other women. And if she didn't offer that job to me, I don't think I would have had the courage to ask for it, right? Like, I think we have to build a confidence within ourselves, but a part of that also comes from others kind of giving us permission to express confidence, right? Because now, like, I know that when I'm working with our interns or any young people in my life, like, I want them to feel that confidence to ask me what they need versus having to wait for it to be asked. But so that's the culture change I think we're also building right now. And but it's all thanks to those that gave us the opportunities and the courage to share power with us. And again, that's what it comes down to. Power is not a scarce resource, and power is neither good or bad. It just depends who wields it. But I will say, for far too long, the same type of folks have held on to all the power, and we are challenging that. And what's great about women entering into positions of power is that we're not holding on to it. We realize that all boats can rise together. We can build it together. And that is the recipe to a more peaceful and collective, community-driven future for all of us.
Well, I can't speak to really formative career experiences because I'm, like I mentioned before, just at the beginning, but I can speak to some experiences or to a specific experience that I've had that sort of shaped my perspective on service and leadership as a person. So I mentioned this at the beginning, but I have been involved in the homeless community in Gainesville, and part of that was getting to know women who are experiencing desperate hardship, things that you would never imagine. And are just blindingly painful, sort of stepping into that and getting to know them, not as someone who is like a charity case, but someone who is a person who has a name and has a story, someone who is deserving of dignity. And so I had this privilege over the past several years during my time at UF, but one person comes to mind, and I developed this relationship with her over time. And one day I just sort of, I walked up to her and we were out working with the homeless and getting them connected to resources. And she calls me over and she's like, listen, Julia, I don't want to ask of anything too much of you, but it rained a couple days ago and I don't have any dry clothes. This woman was soaking wet. I mean, not a stitch of her was dry. And she's looking to me, she's like, I don't really feel comfortable asking the guys in your group, but I really need some dry clothes. Like, can you help me? And it was one of those things where it's really kind of a simple ask, like, hey, I need a dry shirt. But it's informative, I think, of what public service is and what really being a human being is. And it's what we talked about earlier, the idea that we can sort of look to need and notice the people around us in a way that's meaningful and impactful. You can do that on the macro scale, but both representatives that are here today do that. But I think we are called to faithfully look to the need of the people that sit next to us every day that we pass on the street. And then if we've ever forgotten that as women or really as people at all, it's a terrible thing. And I think it leads to, Representative Escamani, what you were saying is when people sort of hold on to power and that power is not a scarce resource. I think that sort of the hoarding of that power comes when we forget who our neighbors and friends are on the street next to us. And I think it's critically important that we do that. So that moment, really, if I look back on the past several years as I've sort of started to move into a career, I think I'll always look back on that minute. Like I could tell you, I could describe to you what she was wearing, and I could describe to you the sort of setting around me. But I think it's those moments when those things click, like something changes. We realize that our job is to take care of the people around us. And part of that is taking care of ourselves. Part of that is lifting other people up and equipping them to do the same thing. So if I had to think of a formative career experience, that would be it, because it pointed me in a direction towards people. And what a privilege that is. That's such an exciting thing to be able to say is your direction, because if you're moving towards people, I think you're moving in the right way. So that's just something that's exciting for me, and definitely was formative.
That's very insightful from all three of you. And as we wrap up, I'm going to ask you to leave the group with words of advice or additional thoughts that you've been inspired to share. I'll share quickly my own story of starting off in politics, and I ran for mayor of the city of Fort Myers when I was 26 years old, 12 years ago. And that was my first array in politics. And I lost that race, but it was the best experience that I could have ever have had for myself, because through that journey, through that experience, I reconnected with my community and met so many great new folks and heard their stories and learned what made our community beat, where that heartbeat was, and what people were truly struggling with and cared about. And then through my career, I've been able to have an impact on those issues. And then 12 years later, here I am in the State House serving my community. So I'd encourage everybody out there to get involved and get involved as much as you want. And you can take those risks and continue to learn and grow. And one door closes and a better door can open, but you can't lose when you get out there and try to help folks and be part of your community family. So ladies, let's go backwards. Julia, let me start with you, then Samantha, and then Representative Escamani. Share with us some closing thoughts and for the group.
Well, I think the most important thing for me has been to take stock of the two things, what I'm good at and what I'm bad at, and then invest in both. And also invest in having people in your life who will tell you, and do so truthfully, but truth and love, I think is something that is critically important. The other thing is to really develop mentorships that are not just professional. So people that you look to for their character, for the way that they love other people. One critical element of sort of my professional development has been able to have those people to talk to me about my faith, to talk to me about my decisions in life, the way that I'm going, because I think sometimes we forget in leadership that we are whole people. There's more to us than just sort of the grind and what it is that we do every day. And if we forget that, then we're really forgetting ourselves and forgetting a really critical element of what it is that we have to contribute. I think that is really important. And then the last piece of advice I have was a piece of advice that was given to me that changed my perspective on the way that I am sort of proceeding in my life. And it's to keep a list of all the things that you really love. Like really, really love. On my list, I've got things like I love the water. I love going out on a boat, fishing. I'm a saltwater fishing nerd. I love it. And if I ever forget that, I am forgetting an important part of what I am. And I think keeping grounded, and that ties back to the people that are with you and the people who stand alongside you and who mentor you, to remind you, hey, Julia, do you remember the things that you love? What it is that's important to you? What are your priorities? So keeping that list of the things you love, keeping a list of your priorities so that you don't forget, because it's easy to forget when you're exhausted and when you are sort of at the end of your rope. But going back to those things is going to be what fills you up and allows you to fill others up. So those are just my pieces of advice. I'm sure come back to me in 20 years, I'll have more for you. I promise, but that's what I have right now. Anything else is just a shot in the dark.
Well, building off of that, I think it's absolutely important, as Julia said, pursue the things that you love. And so for me, what I encourage, young women or even established women to do is really serve on those local boards. So if you can find a commission appointed opportunity, or even serving that nonprofit that maybe you went through or you benefited from, or your sons and daughters. I mean, it's as simple as, volunteering with Girl Scouts, or like I said, stepping into a much more publicly seen role. I think it will prepare you for the next steps, but it will also, to Julia's point again, help you hone those skills that are your strengths, but also ones that you want to say, you know what, that's not going to be where I lead, and you're going to bring someone along to kind of fill you, support you in the years to come. So I think it's as simple as that. It's just seizing the opportunities when they come up, but also finding them because they may not always just fall at your feet. And I think, we've heard about the importance of mentorship. It's sharing those desires with others. So when those opportunities come up, somebody will seek you out.
And the only thing that I'll add is, because my colleagues just shared some awesome advice, is just to take care of yourself in the process. We don't talk about self-care enough in this work, and it's a lot to balance. There's often this term called the second shift used to describe working women, because for so many women, they are professionals in the daytime, and they get home and they put on their mom hat. Now they're working that second shift, and they're not paid for that second shift, by the way, though they should. Motherhood is one of the most important jobs in this world, and one of the most difficult jobs. And so to take care of yourself in this process and make sure that you are giving yourself grace is super, super important. And whether it's just around that personal ecology of balancing work and life, or if it's as Samantha talked about, you went for something that didn't work out so much, but you learned from that. Just give yourself grace. I think that there are so many. There's so many incredible women that are so hard on themselves, and there's no reason to do that. We will dust ourselves back up, and we'll keep going forward, and just know that you're not alone in that journey as well.
Representative, that's amazing advice to end our conversation on, and I want to share with everybody too. Yes, you are not alone in that journey. It is something we all deal with every single day, and there's so many things we all deal with that are the same every day. So again, feel free to reach out anytime with any questions. Those who are listening or ever want a piece of advice, I know we're available for that, and we're happy to do that. So thank you again, ladies, for the time today. I'm more inspired to get to work this week after listening to you all. So thank you.